good evening, whatever time you're watching this. Welcome to our webinar. I am Dr. Anthony Newton, and I am a psychologist here at Unmind. So again, a big thank you all for signing up, logging in, and clicking on to the webinar for World Mental Health Day. So in terms of housekeeping, we've got an hour or so planned. So 45 minutes of conversation and about 15 minutes or so of questions. But I'll also try and pepper some questions throughout the conversations, just to sort of keep us involved and also to get through as many as we can. I'm sure there'll be many questions. So do put them in the chat. Do feel free to add to the conversation as well. So we really want to hear from you as well and not just hear me or us talking. So the webinar, like I say, is very special. And I will be joined by two special guests. So I have Simone, who'll introduce herself a bit later on, and Elton Jackson, who will be joining us a little bit later on. He's just working his way into the webinar. So bear with us with Elton. But before all of that, I did want to introduce a bit about World Mental Health Day today. So the theme this year is mental health is a universal human right. So it's a reminder to us all that mental well-being should be accessible to all, no matter who you are or where you come from. So the overall objective of World Mental Health Day is to raise awareness of mental health issues from around the world and to mobilize efforts in support of mental health. So it provides an opportunity for all people like Unmind or others who are working on mental health issues to talk about what we do and how we work, but more importantly, what needs to be done to make mental health care a reality for all people in some way, shape, or form. So as a psychologist, it's an issue that's close to my heart. Obviously, it's what I do. I'm very passionate about telling people about mental health and educating and seeing how psychology could be useful in the world and helpful and hopefully improves people's lives overall. So it's a topic that's very close to my heart and something which I sort of try to embody and live by. So specifically on Mind, our webinar is on how can we make work for you. It's a bit of a mouthful there, but how can we make work for our well-being? So we'll have a discussion about that. We'll have a think about that, and hopefully you enjoy the conversation. And yeah, again, feel free to put questions in the chat. We want to hear from you guys. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce one of our very special guests, Simone Fenton-Jarvis. So would you like to say a little bit about what you do and how you work? And yeah, tell us about who you are.
Yeah, morning everybody. Simone Jarvis. And I guess, my background really has been in facilities management, moving into workplace experience, and I've been a senior leader now for a number of years. So I'm coming at this from an angle of, I guess, my own mental health, also the mental health of those that I've managed, and also the wider business. A few years ago, I also wrote a book called The Human-Centric Workplace. So I'm all about ensuring that workplaces enable the person, the community, and essentially the planet to thrive. So a little bit about me.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much for introduction, Simone. And Elton, so good to see you. Thank you
Hi there.
For joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Would you be so kind as to tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what you work and how you work?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I started the beginning of my career sort of in acid house music. So as soon as in '88, basically, when acid house really broke through, I happened to be living up in Manchester at the time and immediately got involved in that scene and very quickly got sort of involved in running some of the events and the parties and so on. And from that moment on, it sort of just slowly sort of built that this was something that I wanted to do. So music for me has been a really big thing, but I suppose I've always been really interested in people, and in some ways I guess dance music was part of that kind of link to meeting a generation of people that wanted to do things perhaps slightly differently. I mean, it was a very political movement as well as it being something sort of brand new sort of musically, and my sort of interest grew into sort of wanting to get into sort of writing music, and then I became part of several bands, and one band was quite successful. We had #1 around the world, did loads of touring, which was great fun, and then the band split up, and so it's going to, what am I going to do? And so I sort of decided to become a Samaritan, and I was doing that, and people, like my friends, were sort of saying, you seem to be far more excited about that than you do about doing the sort of club work and the event management and things that I was also then doing at the time to sort of make money and keep a roof over my head.
Yeah.
it was then that I suddenly thought, well, maybe I should train. So I decided to train as a psychotherapist. And I did a 5-year training course at WPF, which was really grueling, actually. But I feel so grateful for having that really sort of full-on training, because it's really anchored me in the way that I think as a psychotherapist. After that, I set up my private practice. And then after a few years of the private practice, I then decided to do some further training. So I've trained specializing in trauma, the psychological impact of trauma. And then I've gone on to be a trained business supervisor. So I've done that.
Yeah.
And then that sort of really seemed to launch my career psychotherapeutically, because then I was a clinical director of a charity that supported men who'd been raped or sexually abused. Then I went back to WPF and ran their clinic, where we saw about 450 clients a week. And then I started teaching diversity within training institutes. And you know, it just, I sort of felt like this was like, because, you know, this really was my second career. And it was blossoming, you know, it was going well. Then we had COVID, and then so that was all a bit long for me, because, you know, I was sort of having to turn all my clients from face to face, you know, in person, to everything being online, and that was quite a culture shock for some of my clients. But I had been working with a couple of clients online for some time. Anyway, after that, I found out this job was going at Sony Music, and it was the first of its kind, Director of Artist and Employee Welfare. And yes, so I'm coming up to 2 years there. Broad remit, because it was never, you know, it was a brand new role, so we had nothing to sort of really bounce off from what had gone before. So I've been hitting the ground running with it. And it's, yeah, I mean, I suppose part of it is making sure that there's access, really. So access to that support. So people will come to me in the first instance, sort of triage, see what's going on for them. Everything they say to me is completely confidential. It doesn't go anywhere else. I would then look at either the things that we've already got in place at Sony. So we've got AXA insurance, which, you know, you can get counselling there. Most of that's, you know, pretty straightforward stuff. But of course, some of the things that are landing on my desk are much more complicated than that, and they need a more comprehensive sort of, you know, intervention. So I'll then go and reach out and go and find people up and down the country that might actually fit that role and that need for that particular client, the artist or the employee. And I'm doing workshops with them, and I'm doing bespoke bits of work with different departments that are maybe having trouble adapting to different things, and just trying to sort of really get change, you know, up and going there. I mean, it's a very fertile place in terms of mental health, because the CEO has been really pushing mental health for some time. So when I landed, the soil was really fertile. So anything that I've been bringing in seems to be sort of well liked. So yeah, so that's
thank
what
you. I mean,
I'm doing.
it's such a rich, sort of colourful history. You really sort of, as I've heard on my notes, you live sort of many lives, different capacities, and actually they all inform sort of where you are now, and also where your ability to support people now and help people now. So going from music to psychotherapy, and how each thing sort of led you to where you are now in terms of being the director of artist wellbeing. And it was like a real integration of sort of who you are and your experiences. So it's really, really good. And thank you so much for that sort of very sort of vivid history. I think we've got a good sense of sort of who you are. So appreciate that candidness. So I know we have quite a lot to get through. There is got such a full packed agenda in many ways. So what I wanted to ask the audience, with the theme in mind of this year, so mental health is a human right and white matters at work, I wanted to ask the audience, what does mental health being a human right mean to you? So what does mental health mean to you, or what does mental health being a human right mean to you? So I'd really love for people to put their answers in the chat, and then we could spend a bit of time at some point just reflecting on that and coming back to it to see what people wrote. So I'd be grateful if people can just put, what does mental health as a human right mean to you? So yeah, I would love to sort of hear what you folks are saying about that. So let's get cracking, really. So I did have a question for you, Elton, if that was okay. So we've seen an increase in common mental health conditions among the workforce. For example, things like depression, anxiety, OCD, and of course the neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is increasing in terms of people seeking diagnosis, but also the awareness of it, and the two are going hand in hand, of course. So I was just sort of wondering, so all of these things obviously contribute to absenteeism, people not attending work, or presenteeism. So people are there, but they're not really engaged in what they're doing. They're sort of there in body, but not there in sort of mind or spirit. And of course, that impacts staff turnover. So I was just curious, Elton, in terms of at Sony, kind of what you folks are thinking about there to sort of address these challenges of mental health in the workplace, or people who might be experiencing or going through the diagnosis of neurodiversity, or they might be feeling depressed or anxious. I was just wondering what you guys are doing there at the moment, or if you could say a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, as I sort of pointed to before, we've been, so Jason Eiley, who's the CEO, has been really pushing mental health for a long time. So, I mean, I think it was about, so it's probably 6 years ago now, thinking about it, that Sony partnered with Mind. And we had training provided for everybody in the business, right from Jason right the way through the system, within the office space. And what that actually did was it brought a massive awareness to everybody in the business about, what mental health is and what it might look like. I mean, I think that's one of the other things, because, sometimes if you don't understand anything about mental health, you don't know what to do when somebody is suffering with it, and you might not know what the signs are either. And I think that can cause a lot of problems, because people might get the wrong end of the stick of actually what's going on for that particular person. So we've been providing different workshops and various trainings within our system, so that it would educate leaders about what to look out for and how to look out for it. I mean, you've commented on a number of different things there. I mean, I think the one thing that I would love to sort of just drill into a little bit is the neurodiversity piece, because obviously right around the world, I think people are becoming so much more aware of that, and the complication of it and the wide spectrum of that. And one of the things that we've been looking at was how we sort of incorporate an environment that people feel comfortable to work in with any type of neurodiversity. Now, I think historically what's happened is someone might have been diagnosed with something, and then there's reasonable adjustments made within the workplace. Well, we've decided to sort of go one step further with that and sort of make everything as neurodiverse friendly as possible right from the word go. So we're taking this right to the beginning of, even, when someone's coming through for an interview, for instance, that we're making this absolutely clear, that we are friendly, and if they want to do an interview in a slightly different way and so on, that they can. And so now we're sort of in an environment where, somebody might come up to me in the workplace and, they'll sort of say, well, I've got this diagnosis now, which has been helpful to know. It's, bit of a culture shock to sort of realize that is what's been going on for me for so long. And then I've sort of, been supporting them to sort of see how they are adapting within the system. And actually somebody came up to me the other day and said, actually I was feeling really distracted and realized that I couldn't concentrate anymore. And they didn't then have to go to their boss to say, oh, I need to go and take a break, I need to go and work in a quieter room or anything like that. They were just able to sort of move and go and do that themselves. No one's worrying about that. There is this sort of fluid way of working. And I think that even the fact that that's happening, the fact that it's being seen to happen, changes the culture of how people feel within the workplace when they've got that. And I'm having a lot of people come up to me now and email me, or grab me in the canteen or whatever and say, look, can I talk to you about neurodiversity? And so we've got little groups being set up and so on. So and a lot of it's being led actually by the people that have the neurodiversity, because they're able now to really tell us what they need. And we are working alongside that, in a partnership to sort of make that possible, so that it does feel friendly enough and easy enough, I guess, to even ask those questions in the first place.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. I mean, just what stood out for me is that it really starts at the top. You know, it started at the CEO level. So he had an interest in mental health and brought in a partner. And it would just remind me of the importance of partnerships. So, you know, a business might not know everything about mental health, and that's fine. But I guess it's taking the time to think about, okay, who can we partner with, or who can we bring in to support the understanding of mental health in our business or in our company. And I really liked what you said about you know, neurodiversity not being an afterthought, if you like, or an addition. It's woven into the company. You know, you have things that are just there. It's not so people don't feel different or, you know, segregated. And again, even here at Unmind in offices, we've got certain quiet zones, you know, where people can sort of work from, and it's sort of woven in a bit more into the fabric of how we communicate. You know, you could work flexibly, or, you know, work from home, whatever it is that you need. So yeah, thank you again for that answer. It really did stir up quite a lot of thoughts for me anyway. I appreciate that. So Simone, I wanted to ask you a question, if that was okay with you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about if there are any practical tips that we can action to move to a more inclusive and supportive working environment for people who might be struggling with mental health. So if someone does have a mental health issue or condition and someone is neurodiverse, for example, what are some of the practical things that we could do you think, to make things more inclusive for people? Oh, hello, Simone. Hi, Simone. If you have that.
Just wondering whether she's
on mute,
frozen or something. I think, is she frozen?
Oh. Okay, let's give her a moment to come back.
Yeah.
She might have to click out and click in again.
Yeah, I was just wondering that.
Okay. Well, maybe whilst waiting for Simone, I don't know if you had any further things to say about any practical tips, Elton. Again, I've just mentioned some that here at Unmind. So we have a specific zone, you know, a quiet room,
Yeah.
or focus room. We allow people to work very flexibly and practically. And also, again, in terms of us, we have one-to-ones quite regularly. So it's an opportunity for people to sort of, if they choose to, sort of disclose any health issues they have or mental health issues they're having. But I was just wondering, again, from your end, if there's any sort of practical things that you might be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I mean, I don't want to sound too generic here, but I mean, really, the first bit that, you know, around this is to listen to somebody. I mean, that's the first part, isn't it? We've got to be able to be, you know, you've got to be able to be in contact and in conversation and in exchange with somebody in order to change anything and to move anything. And I mean, sort of pointing a little bit back to what I was saying before, you know, I mean, the thing is, people can assume all sorts of things might be going on for somebody until you ask what's going on. You just don't know. And I think particularly with mental health, you know, I mean, I suppose if I was to take it back into my consulting room, for instance, you know, a client comes in to see me for the first time, you know, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, the client will present themselves and whatever maybe their presenting problem is, but there might be other sort of things that they sort of say. There's like little nuances or bits that they might sort of touch on, but they don't go into a great deal of detail about. But as the therapist, you know, I've heard that and I've thought about it and I'm thinking, I wonder whether there's something else going on here. And then, you know, that gives you an opportunity to explore further, to see what's going on. And I don't think in many ways it's much difference in any workplace, actually. You know, if you realize that somebody's struggling, or that you see things aren't working as well as they have done, or perhaps they're missing deadlines, or they're coming into work late, or you can see something's going on. The first part is to be able to have that conversation with them to see what's going on. Are they okay? And then I suppose after that, you know, if they do say that, you know, that they're indicating that something isn't okay for them psychologically, then it's about what next, isn't it? And I think some people with no experience of mental health can feel very spooked by that and might not know what to do. And I think other people will sort of say, right, okay, well, let's get you through to professionals that might be able to assess and see what's going on.
Yeah.
But really, at the very beginning, I think, Anthony, it's got to be that initial conversation, hasn't it? Because without that, you can't get anywhere else.
I agree, 100%. So I think the conversation is definitely important. But I think also it's allowing people to feel safe enough, actually, to have the conversation, because some people might not feel very confident in their managers or superiors to even disclose or discuss what's going on for them. Hi, Simone. Good to have you back.
I just have to run in the house and reset the router. It just
Oh, bless you, bless you. Well, good to see you. I will. I'll repeat the question just very briefly. If you had any thoughts about any practical tips as how we could any actions we could take towards moving towards an inclusive or supportive working environment for people who are struggling with mental health.
Sure. I don't know where I got up to before it cut off, so sorry if I'm
I didn't hear how you started. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So I'll come at this from a bit of a do's and don'ts, really, and I think that's an important angle to come up with. So I think the first do for me is about the open communication, creating that culture where people can openly talk in that safe space to the people that they trust, i.e. their leader, around how they might need certain kind of maybe accommodations in the workplace, or they might need more flexible working arrangements because they need to go to, say, a therapy appointment, or they might just have one of them days where they wake up in the morning and they feel absolutely pants, and they just need a bit of flexibility to go, you know what, I'm just going to go for a walk, I'll go to the gym, walk my dog, and then I'm going to start work at 11 o'clock and it's no big deal. And I think, so that open communication bit. But don't, on the flip side of that, is when somebody discloses something to you, don't react with almost a what's wrong with you, because that is like the worst kind of, it's almost shaming the person.
Just get on with it. Yeah, get on with it. What's wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it might not be about what's wrong with them, it might be what's happened to them, or there's so many angles you could come at that with. And then I think the other thing that I would really say is, if you're doing any kind of program in your organization, just please don't make sure it's not a tick box. And I think by the do of that is make sure it's role modeled from top down, and just avoid doing the whole, oh, it's Mental Health Awareness Day, so this time we care about your well-being, but you're not resourcing people properly, you're not making sure that financially they're looked after. There's so many things around that kind of do's and don'ts that you should do. So yeah, I think that's in short, and I know we're probably pushed on time after that little cut off, so I won't go on too much.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, as you points out, good communication, sort of flexibility in working, very important. I think there is something about maybe some organizations and structures can be quite rigid, and then if we take someone, for example, who might have a neurodiverse condition, maybe rigidity doesn't quite work for them. For example, that someone might be autistic or ADHD, that maybe a high level of rigidity might not work, and you're not making that person be the best that they can be, really, because we're not really adapting to their needs, or we're expecting everybody to be a particular way and to fall in line in a particular way. When actually, in reality, our brains don't all operate in the exact same way. There's differences among us.
The crucial thing is to know your people. I think to know your people, to know when something doesn't seem right with them, to know when something changes, if behavior changes, and to then have that relationship that you can talk to them. And I think that knowing your people and knowing, what kind of structure they need, what kind of clarity they need, whether it be during change management and communications, or whether it be a one-to-one and they're better face-to-face, or they're happy to do it over Teams or even a phone call, and just really respond to people as individuals and be, human-centric, essentially.
Right, human approach. Thank you for that, Simone. I just want to turn the attention very briefly to the chat. People have been posting what mental health is for them, or why it's a human right for them. So I want to just pick up on one or two. So let's have a quick look. So people say there's no health without mental health. We all deserve to have our health, our well-being prioritized, feeling okay, and being you and being accepted. So thank you for that, Deborah. Everyone has a right to be healthy and well. This includes mental health. Very true. And it's okay to not be okay, and we should not be sorry. non-judgmental, being accepted. I think that's very important. I think, again, creating those safe spaces, not judging people, and trying to be open with people as much as we can. Access to support and therapy. It's a very big one, very big topic as well, because as we know, it's not all equitable for everyone, and there can be long waiting lists or affordability. So there can be some factors that can hinder that. But yes, access to support and therapy is very key. Education is there. Katie, hello Katie, a world in which everyone has a right to access to support their mental health and well-being. So yeah, thank you all so much for this. It's all very inspiring. All having peace of mind to feel safe, to express my beliefs and values, and to feel respected at all times. Wow, thank you, Melinda. So yeah, thank you for all of those lovely comments, and inspiring and challenging as well comments about what human mental health means to you. Is very good to sort of read. So thank you for that. Okay, I wanted to bring the chat's voice in a bit. So yeah, so I'm gonna move on now. So back to you, Simone. I wanted to ask a little bit about sort of leadership. I've spoken a little bit about how, in my opinion, it does sort of start at the top and to some degree, in terms of the conversations that we have, in terms of the culture that is set, how people can feel at work. I think leaders do play a part in that. And I was wondering about what your thoughts are on the role of leaders in fostering mental well-being in the workplace.
I think, it depends where you are in the organization. If you take the average kind of middle leader, for me, they are the buffer between the pressures that may come down from the top and the kind of the people on the ground. And I think for me, that middle leader at the moment is proving really, really important, because of course, there's an economic crisis. Of course, businesses are struggling. There's really tough decisions that are being made across businesses all around the world. For me, the middle leader and the leadership there comes into it of we need to do this in a way that is protecting people during this kind of maybe process. I think, the making sure that expectations are meeting in line with resourcing is the crucial one that I am seeing a massive challenge with at the moment. Expectations are coming down and people are saying, but we have reduced our team by 20%, and yet our expectations are not reduced by 20%. So there's things like that coming through. Depending on obviously the organisation, it could be even scrutiny from the public. There was a local council somewhere, I think it might have been Haringey, where they wanted to implement a 4-day working week to support well-being and avoid burnout. And actually the scrutiny that came from the public was, that's taxpayers' money. You can't work a 4-day week. And, and yet they've got all the data that shows how it's going to back up the well-being of their team members. So I think it really depends on what organisation it is and the leader, but essentially it's everybody has got challenges at the moment with this. And obviously, essentially we've just come out of a period where it's trauma inducing. And I think that's been really underestimated at the moment. I think, if 1 in 8 around the world is currently diagnosed with suffering from a mental health issue, actually, if you think how much is undiagnosed and how much is still going through the system, I think we've got a massive problem on our hands coming up into the next few years, where this trauma is essentially going to kick in for a lot of people. So we need to, as leaders, adapt and be aware of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message about adaptability. And as you said, the sort of middle leader, I guess they have quite an influence on people. I guess people at the very top might not have as much influence on the workers, but I guess people who are in the middle position. And I'm glad that you sort of brought up the issue of, I guess, the wider world around us, what's going on in the world and our societies and what's happening economically can impact and does impact on businesses and how businesses are adapting, but also how that impacts on the individuals as well who work for the businesses, as well as them being a part of the world that might be struggling a little bit financially and things like that. So it's all important. It does all kind of weave into each other. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that. And Elton, I'll ask you a similar question. So in terms of what have you implemented at sort of Sony to make sure that leaders have a role in fostering mental well-being?
I mean, I couldn't agree with what you said more. I just think particularly around the middle management stuff as well, I think it's crucial in businesses that middle managers are supported and given access to understanding mental health and the stress and strain. I mean, think in a very broad way, the middle management role is so important, because I think if you can do that role, then you could probably do any role within the business as far up as the CEO. It's a really complex position to be in any business, I think.
Right.
And for instance, Sony, I mean, I've done a whole breadth of different sorts of workshops, one of which was how to manage up and how to manage down.
Okay.
And the stress and strains that are actually placed within that position within the business, and whether there are support structures there to help people understand what that role is and how to manage it. And I think it's quite interesting, actually, because I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and they was saying, what do you think has been the best thing that's been done at Sony around mental health? And I think it's stigma. And I think, Simone, we might have even touched on this when we spoke once before, how stigma can just really freeze people. And I think one of the things that Sony have managed to do is, they partnered with Mind 6 years ago now, and that partnership continues. And we've just done another batch of retraining again for the new people that have come into the business since COVID. And then alongside that, they've got my role, and I'm in the office and I'm wandering around, and people are now coming up to me in the canteen. Oh, are you Elton? Because apparently you helped one of my colleagues about something. Can I have a chat with you? I could be leaving the building, I could be in the lift. And I think in many ways, that visibility of having the role, having me, promote that role within the business, just by being there, is changing the culture and allowing people to think, I can talk about mental health. I can talk about what I'm struggling with. I mean, obviously on top of that, as I said, I'm doing these workshops, I'm doing bespoke work with different departments that have got different challenges on. I'm keeping an eye on what the culture of the whole business is. And Jason, the CEO, has said, it's probably going to take you 18 months, 2 years before you even realize what that is, because it's quite a big organization, as we know. But actually just trying to sort of really sort of understand what's going on, what feels possible and what doesn't feel possible, because I think that's the other part of this, that sometimes things can feel so complicated or too big that then they get ignored and nothing happens. Well, again, I think with my role being there and it being visible, we're saying no problem is too big. We might not have the solutions immediately, but we've got the right things in place to find those solutions, and we're going to do that appropriately, thoroughly, and we're going to think very carefully about it, because the last thing you want is this to be sort of like a touchstone and not something that's really, really embedded into the entire business. So again, to Simone's point, this is coming in from Jason right at the top, and it runs right the way through the system, to the point actually where even managers of artists that might be struggling, we're stepping in and supporting them at that level as well. So it's really a 360 degree I suppose approach. And look, there's always room for improvement, and I think what we're doing, we've made a brilliant start. And actually, I'm sort of now thinking, what next? Where are the bits that we haven't covered, and where are the bits that we really need to focus on next? So still a work in process in many ways.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thank you. I guess what I was sort of hearing is that you have a real sort of strategy in place. Again, it's not just sort of quick fix type of thing. It has to sort of be woven into the business, into what you're doing. And yeah, obviously stigma is the things you're doing to sort of combat stigma as well, and actually being quite visible, having a very visible presence around. People know that can speak to you. That's really helpful. I think with stigmas, I think things are only stigmatizing as much as we allow them to be in some respects. So if we want to sort of not have stigma in the workplace, we have to sort of be that change and sort of have things available and have people out there and yeah, I guess just have things that are visible and not push it into the shadows, and have conversations and make things normal, at least in bubbles that we are in. And that becomes less stigmatizing, hopefully, over time.
Well, I think the other thing as well, I really want to sort of just touch very, very quickly on something. Because Sony UK we've got the most diverse team. It's so I think because of that, we've got so many different thoughts and feelings and personalities and people and heritages and we've got trans people, we've got gay people, we've got black people, white people, Asian people. It's a massive melting pot of stuff. And then of course we've got all the artists coming in as well. And I think I think in many ways that sort of demands that we've got to be moving with who we are looking after, who our employees are, who our artists are, who our leaders are. And I think, what we know, there's so much research into this at the moment about, if you're in the music industry, you are 3 times more likely to suffer with neurodiversity, anxiety, depression. And of course, if you think about that, if you've come through the straightforward education system and you are neurodiverse or you have depressive thoughts or whatever, you're probably not going to be excelling very well in school. So you're probably going to move towards the arts in some way. And so it kind of makes sense if you start to look at it, that there's going to be more people that are suffering in that way. And now it's the responsibility for us to think about how we support those people with those, with those very specific and also very personalized needs, because one person's depression is not going to be the same as somebody else's. So it's about really getting to the origin of those things with each person. And I'm very pleased that Sony have got this very fertile place to do it, because I'm lucky. I'm working in an environment where saying, yes, let's support people properly.
Now, you touched on a really important point there in terms of diversity in the workforce, and I keep seeing this metaphor of you wouldn't want a football team with 11 strikers. You need differences. I don't watch football, but you need different people with different skill sets. Very briefly, Simone, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that, or any thoughts you had as Elton was speaking about that before we can move on to the next segment, if you wish.
No, I think move on. I totally agree everything that Elton said there. Yeah, definitely.
Fabulous. Great. Okay, let me have a quick check in the chat for any questions. Oh, if people do have questions, anything we've discussed so far, please put them in, because we'll have a Q&A at the end. So in about 5 minutes time, we're running out of time. But please do put them in, and then we'll have like a nice sort of hopefully a Q&A session to try to address some of the questions that you have, if that was okay. But before we move on, so I'm just aware of the time. So now we have sort of maybe 7 minutes or so before the end, before the end of this section, before we move on to the questions. So maybe we could speak a little bit about burnout, because that seems to be an issue that's affecting workplaces and affecting businesses. And I'll just say a little bit about burnout from a psychological perspective. So I guess it's just that sort of, exhaustion, not just from work, but also from caregiving in some cases. And I guess it's about that sort of, if people think about work-life balance, maybe that balance is somewhat skewed and people can feel extremely tired, and they could have the emotional exhaustion, as well as a sense of disengaging and also being quite cynical about their work. So they want to sort of detach from work. And then that leads, of course, to unproductiveness and inefficiency. So I guess there's 3 things that contribute to burnout. So emotional exhaustion, disengagement, and unproductivity. So all things that we need to be effective at work. So it's not a nice feeling, being quite burnt out at work. There's no end in sight, not taking enough breaks, feeling quite stressed. But I was just wondering, maybe we can ask both of you, Simone and Elton. So what pressures are senior leadership under at the moment with a focus on burnout? I don't know who wants to answer, but go ahead.
I think I can start if you like. I think the pressure that I hear all the time is, where does the line get drawn between the responsibility of the employer, the responsibility of the manager, and then the responsibilities of the employee to then look after themselves? And I think that's an interesting point, because our organizations, I guess, can still only take mental health so far before the individual then has to go, I need further support. That whole first step is accepting. Maybe there's something here, and you guys probably talk more about this, but it's something that I do see day to day, in that people are just unsure about where the line is between, is it for my role to step in and support her? And I'm talking, I'm not talking about extreme things where organizations are treating people in a toxic culture like awfully, and they're not supporting them, they're underpaying them. I'm not talking about them extreme examples that unfortunately happen so much. I'm talking about them things of, my manager may be treating me in this way, and actually it's resulting in me feeling like this. And it's then, okay, so what can the individual do? And I think as individuals in the workplace, I do think we all need to reflect as well what we can do to help ourselves as well. And if that is changing jobs, removing ourselves from the situation in the extreme form, then that's what we have to do. So I think there's an element of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Elton, I don't know if you had any sort of questions, answer to the question of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good and interesting question, because and I think it's really difficult to get the solution to this, but I think there is a responsibility with everybody involved. So you know, it's not just the employer, it's also the employee has a responsibility as well. And because of this, I think, again, there's pressure on leaders to sort of have all the answers. And actually, that's not, you know, they're not going to have all the answers, you know, I mean, and I think that can feel really, really heavy. And I'm actually just putting a workshop together, which I'm delivering in a few weeks' time, actually, on this specific area. And it's, you know, where do our job roles start and stop? You know, how do we deal with difficult and complex information that our employees might give us about their personal lives and the stresses that they're under? Where does the leaders' role start and stop at that point? You know, how much should they be doing? I mean, I have leaders and managers coming to me. It's only quite regularly. I mean, I would probably say I get this probably at least 2 or 3 times a month. Oh, you know, I've got an employee that's come with some really, really complex home life situation or a very difficult mental health thing. You know, what should I be doing, or what else should I be doing? And I think to understand that line can be really complicated. And the trouble is, there's no one line that's going to fit everybody in that sense, because each situation is going to be unique. So it's got to be looked at in that unique way. Sometimes we might need to step in more. Sometimes we might need to step in less. And knowing where that place is very difficult. So the more understanding we have, then I think the better equipped people are to kind of make a judgment on what they should and what they shouldn't perhaps be doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you both touched on good points. I think, you know, managers are not therapists, essentially. They're not trained therapists. But at the same time, I guess it is having those conversations, and maybe it's for them knowing, gauging how much do I step in, or how much can I refer to someone, or who can I speak to, or how can I support them, you know, to support themselves. So I think it is finding that balance, even if it's just referring someone back to their doctor or their GP or whatever the case might be. That could be a start, or their employee wellbeing service if they have one, or whatever. Maybe it might be a signposting type of position that person could have, as well as supporting them in work, how they could make their work life a little bit better.
Yeah, and on that, I think it's really important as well for people to know where the line is, to know where the boundary is, because actually they can do more harm than good if they overstep the mark. And you know, you need professional support sometimes. And it's important that leaders don't take that on and then give themselves, you know, well-being and burnout challenges because they've taken something on that is now challenging them or triggering them or anything like that. So, you know, sometimes the best thing you can do is to refer as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got one final question for you both. So what's on the horizon for workplace wellbeing? What would you both like to see? What would be your ideal? And I'm sure we could talk a lot about there's lots of clear sky, blue sky thinking, that's what it's called. But what would you like to see in the workplace horizon in terms of workplace well-being? What would be your next step, for example, Elton or Simone? What would be ideal for you, very briefly?
Yeah, do you want me to go? I think for me, I would love to see the purpose of the physical office to be defined as the space that is almost a buffer of the digital world that we're in, because this isn't healthy for a human being. We know that all the data so far, it's not healthy. So actually I love it that if the office and everything that comes with that, like the commute and everything else that comes with that, became that buffer of this is the place that I go to have almost a digital detox from that world there. I still believe in hybrid working very much, but I think we've got to get to a point where people have got a balance, and I think that's really where, from a well-being point of view, where we need to get to. I think the other thing for me as well that's crucial that we're really focused on is things like resilience training. So they're the 2 things I would probably focus on at the moment if I was in that position.
Fine, thank you. And Elton, what would you like to see next?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more about the the office and the hybrid working that Simone's talking about, I think, you know, we haven't seen the real fallout yet, I don't think, from what, you know, COVID and lockdown has done to people. You know, and also, as we were talking before, you know, the way the world is at the moment economically, and with all of the pressures that are associated with that, I just think people's lives are just so much harder.
Yeah.
And I think the home and work-life balance, which we've all spoken about for years and years and years, there's nothing new about it. But what is new is that we're in a very, very different place right now. And what I would really hope for is that all businesses can understand the real pressures that society place on their employees every single day. And I mean that right the way from the CEO, right the way through the system, down to those middle managers and the people that are just starting their careers and starting at the beginning and coming in at the entrance point. Because I think these pressures are huge and you know, they're not manageable, because they are, a lot of those pressures are taken out of our control. You know, the cost of living's gone up. How do we manage that? You know, our salaries haven't necessarily gone up, you know, all of that stuff. So I think hybrid working is really important. I think, again, office spaces being really, really flexible to people's needs. You know, in that perhaps there's different places to work within the, you know, within the office. And I know that's not all, again, it's not always possible, is it? Because, you know, startups might not have the money to be sort of making those sorts of environments possible. But I think if we can move towards that sort of way of working, I just think you're going to see employees' anxieties drop. I think you're going to see a higher performance and better output. And really, if the office space isn't available, that's why the hybrid working becomes so vitally important in this sort of situation. So we really need to focus on our workers right the way through the system to ensure that their environments are conducive to actually delivering what their roles require from them.
Okay, thank you for both your responses. Yeah, very helpful. So we've sort of come to the end of our discussion section, so we can slowly move into the Q&A. And thank you so much for the questions that have been posted so far. It is very helpful. So I'm just having a quick scan now. And one of the themes people are asking is, let's have a quick look. So, okay, so I've got a question from someone here. So how do you get staff engaged with the concept of self-awareness? My experience as a career coach and well-being manager is that most people find it difficult initially, but quickly see the impact they can have. So how do we get staff engaged with the concept of self-awareness?
I think we start from don't just focus on self-awareness, but focus on that triad of awareness. So you look at yourself, you look at the awareness of others, you look at the awareness of the environment around you, and then start almost to create that sense of, if we can understand all them three angles, this is how we will all improve working together. This is how we will all improve our mental health. So I think we've got to come at it from rather than you need to improve your self-awareness, because that might make people feel a little bit defensive. I think actually it's our awareness, and we come at it from a very balanced and holistic approach.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I had a question, maybe this one might be one for you, Elton, actually. So someone's asking about, they feel burnt out. What's a good way of resetting? Maybe coming from a psychotherapeutic perspective, and also I could maybe chip in psychologically.
Well, I mean, and it's funny because, as you said, you know, a lot of people are talking about burnout at the moment, and I think, again, I mean, just sort of to touch on the sort of COVID stuff, I think actually some of the stuff what happened in COVID was that people were working even more because they were at home and they weren't traveling and they weren't breaking properly and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, I think, you know, I think burnout's a really interesting one because, again, it's going to be unique to each person. But I think it's, you know, something about trying to sort of spot the signs of burnout, you know, before it actually gets into a situation where somebody really does need to take, you know, a considerable amount of time off, maybe in the most extreme circumstances. But, you know, some of the really simple things, you know, making sure you get enough sleep, trying to get some exercise, eating as healthily as possible, water. I mean, people just don't drink enough water, and it's remarkable what that does to our systems.
Yeah.
I'm consistently saying to people at work, take a morning break, take a lunch break, take an afternoon break. And I know that that's not always possible in the workplace, because there are times when we are just on and we just have to be. But on those times that we're not, you need to take that break. And in fact, one of the other things that I do, and I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day about this, because I was trying to book a meeting in with her. So I went into her diary and she was just literally back to back all day. And I said to her, I said, where do you break? You know, when do you have a break?
Yeah.
And actually, when I'm putting things in my diary, I mean, you know, I will actually decline things, because if there's too many meetings in one day, I just say no, you know, because I am not a computer. I am not the internet. I am not available all the time. I just can't be, because I'm a human being. And if you make yourself available all the time, then you will burn out, because it's just not possible. So I think very simply taking breaks, getting as much rest as you possibly can in the first thing. I think if you suddenly find yourself in a position where you are burnt out, then I think you do need to be then turning around to your team, you know, wherever you are in the system, and say, look, actually, I need to take some time out. And I think that time out needs to be quite specific. It isn't about taking a day off, you know, and just watching telly all day. I mean, that might be one way of doing it, but it might also be about, you know, going to a spa, making sure you get your hair done, whatever it is. I don't know. It's something that's actually for you, that's going to go back into you. So I think it's a very personal thing again, but these things can be avoided, and we can look after ourselves a bit better.
Yeah.
You know, quickly on that, I remember during the pandemic when my team were very burnt out. I knew they were getting burnt out, and I looked at the diaries, and it was, you know, lasagna style diary, and it was like, this needs to not be a thing. And I put an hour's meeting in with each of my team members, joined the call, and went, this isn't a meeting, this is your break. Log off, go take an hour. And I think sometimes as a leader, you've got to just step in and build that self-awareness by going, you've got permission to go and look after yourself. So I think, you know, do the small things that might mean a lot to some people as well.
No, I really love that proactive approach. Thank you for sharing that. I think for me as well, I think what we're doing in Unmind, we're sort of trialing a new way of working. So after busy periods, or even a busy meeting, you know, if we're back-to-back meetings, booking in something called active recovery. So what that means is a chance, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes after a meeting, just to kind of do what you want. You can pop your head out, you know, the window, you can go for a walk, you could book a slightly longer active recovery time, go for a run, take the dog out, whatever it is. So the point is that, as you said, that lasagna style diary shouldn't be there, you know. So actually, how can you have breaks in between each meeting, and, you know, say no? Maybe part of burnout is to actually say no, I can't do this, and here's why, or trying to negotiate about your time effectively. And also just doing things like grounding, you know, getting out in the air if you can. I know weather is still nice at the moment. Just, you know, again, popping your head out, learning some strategies around just sort of grounding, using your senses. I think, you know, I've touched on it, Elton. I think, you know, looking at the signs leading up to burnout. I think burnout is not just, you don't just wake up burnt out. I think that it would have happened over a period of time. And I guess it's sort of noticing actually what are your signs and symptoms, really? What is burnout for you? What are you noticing? Are you sleeping really poorly? Has that changed? Is your diet out the window? Are you getting sort of fast food in and not really taking time to actually cook something healthy? You know, you've been being a bit snappier with your partner, you know, or the dog, or whatever it is. So just checking in and for yourself, how are you feeling, or what are your sort of signs and symptoms? And then the next step is to sort of address it, taking as breaks, speaking to managers, speaking to people, looking at your demands, seeing where you could fit in active recovery, or fit in a break, or fit in a holiday, or fit in a walk, you know, taking a bath, actually doing things that will recharge you. I think that's the most important thing as well. So thank you for that. We might have time for one more quick question. So a nice one from Amelia. I think this could be a nice-ish one. So what tips and advice do you have for prioritizing staff care and wellbeing during a period of significant organizational change. So again, as we said, the world around us is changing, things are changing, organizations are changing, you know, how can we prioritize well-being around that?
I don't think it should just be prioritized because there's change going on, because I think the world has been full of change. I think sometimes you have to kind of turn it up, turn it back down again, of course. I think maybe as part of, you know, stakeholder mapping, as part of the change management exercise that's happening, it's understanding the impact on people and then putting things in place to then support them. So it's, sorry for the quite broad answer, but I think for me, it's not like a cookie cutter approach to it. It depends on what the project is. But I think it's maintaining that, doing the right thing, and that conscious awareness that whatever's happening may be affecting people's well-being, to then put small things in place and then support them as you go through that.
Okay, thank you, Simone. Yeah, I don't know, Elton, if you have anything briefly to add.
Well, I mean, again, I think this is the thing. I mean, coming from a psychotherapeutic point of view, I mean, everything has its kind of sort of unique position, and everyone's going to respond uniquely to it. So I think, you know, it is difficult perhaps to answer it in a more sort of drilled down sort of way. But I think, you know, change is consistently happening now. There are obviously going to be more significant things that happen within businesses where difficult decisions are being made, whether there's a reduction in workforce or whatever it might be, and the impact that has on every part of the system. I mean, I think one bit that often gets missed is that if something's going on over there, that people think, oh, it's not going to affect somebody over there, and it does actually. You know, that impacts everybody within the business. So I think there's we need more awareness of how even some of the smallest changes, right up to the biggest changes, may have a very, very similar impact on people. You know, it may be a very personalized impact, or it could be secondary, vicarious impact as well. So I think, again, as I was sort of saying right at the beginning of the webinar, you know, the way we support people is by hearing them. We have to open that dialogue, we have to check in with them, and we have to listen to them, because without those very, very simple things, we're not going to get anywhere very quickly.
I hear that. I do hear that. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, we're coming up to time. Thank you so much, folks. So before we finish, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that we offer at Unmind. So yeah, it's called the Wellbeing Champions Training. So if you want to sort of learn a bit more about mental health and, you know, see how you can support your team and learn practical ways to support mental health, then please do sign up for it. You know, people at home watching, yeah, give it a shot. So here's our QR code. So do scan the QR code. So yeah, you can also, if you also want to download the Unmind app, there's lots of meditations on there. There's lots of things to work on and work through. Please do also download the Unmind app as well. There's a whole different courses on there about mental health, depression, burnout, all the things, some of the things we're speaking about today. So, you know, we hope that you do find it helpful, you do find it useful in some way, shape or form. So I'd like to thank my lovely guests today. So Elton Jackson, thank you so much for being here with us. And Simone, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to have you. I've learned so much just from listening to you. You made it very easy for me to have a conversation with you. And I hope people have found it really helpful. Do feel free to sort of write in and share, you know, how you found today. And this has been recorded, so just share it with your teams. And thank you all so much for joining on World Mental Health Day. Keep spreading the knowledge and keep the learning going. So thank you all so much for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.